Hello children, once again I welcome you to my online class. Today is the third and final video on the chapter A Triumph of Surgery from your supplementary reader book Footprints Without Feet, Class 10 Cbse. My dear children, in the previous video we saw that how in the initial days Tricky was treated by the doctor, whereas Mrs. Humphrey was very worried about her dog Tricky. And now, to have a look on the further developments, let's start the explanation part.
Well, children, on your screens you can see chapter number 1 of supplementary reader, that is A Triumph of Surgery, and this is the third video on this chapter, and this would be the last video. And in the first two videos we discussed that there is a rich lady, her name is Mrs. Humphrey, and she had a pet dog and the name is Tricky. She is very fond of her dog. She loves her dog a lot, and out of that love she provides fatty food, junk food to that dog, but somewhere she never puts that dog on exercise. And what happens, the result is the dog becomes overweight, it becomes hugely fat, and due to what happens, it becomes very lazy, it starts panting very quickly, and its health starts deteriorating day by day. And Mrs. Pumphrey is very worried about her dog. She contacts the vet doctor, James Herriot, the writer himself. And the writer, he advises Mrs. Pumphrey that the dog must be hospitalized for 15 days. And finally, the dog is hospitalized for 15 days. And in the first 2 days, the doctor did not provide any food to the dog, but rather he provided plenty of water. And slowly what happened, the dog Tricky, it started playing with other dogs, and slowly, gradually, there was the symptoms of recovery in that dog. Now let's see what happens. We have to start from here. Yes, we will start from here. All the while, Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background, ringing a dozen times a day for the latest bulletins. Now what is happening? See, the dog is with the doctor, the dog is in the hospital. Mrs. Pumphrey, she's very anxious to know about her dog, and she is literally, she's very nervous, and she's eagerly waiting for some news. And again she's, ringing uh, a dozen times a day, to the doctor to know the latest, news about the dog. I dodged the questions about whether his cushions were being turned regularly or his correct coat worn according to the weather. But I was able to tell her that the little fellow was out of danger and convulsing rapidly. Now, what happened? Mrs. Pumphrey, she was again and again asking the doctor, what about her, what about the cushions? What about, the dress? Have you changed the dress of the dog or not? Have you changed the cushion? Means she was literally worried about the comfort zone of that dog. And the doctor is actually trying to bring out that dog from its comfort zone. And that comfort zone has literally created all these problems for this dog. And that is what the doctor is trying to do. So that is why what happened, he started avoiding, to respond to such type of questions. But yeah, he told Mrs. Pumphrey that now your dog is out of danger and your dog is recovering rapidly. The word convulsing seemed to do something to Mrs. Pumphrey. So the moment Mrs. Pumphrey heard that the dog is improving, the dog is recovering, she became a bit, happy. She was a bit satisfied. She started to bring round fresh eggs, 2 dozen at a time, to build up Tricky's strength. For a happy period, my partners and I had 2 eggs each for breakfast, but when the bottles of wine began to arrive, the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn on the household. It was to enrich Tricky's blood. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses of wine before and several during the meal. Now, see what happened, my dear children. When Mrs. Pumphrey heard this news that her dog Tricky is out of danger and now her dog is recovering, she started sending, again these, rich food for that dog. First of all, she started sending eggs, 2 dozen at a time, 24 eggs at a time. She started sending, to build up Tricky's strength. But what was the problem with that dog? The problem with that dog was the dog was overweight and the dog was fed, fed with a lot of fat, and that was the reason the doctor was literally trying to do. The doctor was literally trying to avoid Tricky from these type of fatty and rich foods. So literally what happened, now the doctor and his partners, they started eating these eggs, 2 eggs each for breakfast. And then what happened, Mrs. Pumphrey started sending wine, bottles of wine for that dog. But the doctor is not going to give this wine to that dog Tricky. Now what happened, he started drinking that wine. Even his partners started drinking that wine. That wine was sent, for enriching Tricky's blood. But the doctor and his partners, they were enjoying that wine. So one thing the doctor understood, what was that? That if the dog is with us, then definitely we will start getting these, these items, eggs, wine, and all sort of things. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses of wine. Now whenever the doctor and his partners, whenever they used to sit for lunch, they used to have this, 2 glasses of wine, then, several other things during the meal. Literally they were enjoying, they were having a very nice time, we could hardly believe it when the brandy came to put a final edge on Tricky's constitution. Now, Mrs. Pumphrey initially she sent eggs, then she sent bottles of wine, and now she started sending brandy. Brandy is also very similar to wine. Okay, now she started sending brandy also. For a few nights, the fine spirit was rolled around, inhaled, and reverently drunk. And now all these things, who were literally using these things, the doctor and his partners, Mrs. Pumphrey, ये सारी चीजें, ये eggs है, ये wine है, ये brandy है, ये किसके लिए भेज रही थी? वो ट्रिकी के लिए भेज रही थी. लेकिन डॉक्टर और उनके फ्रेंड्स ये सारी चीजें ट्रिकी को देने के बजाय खुद यूज कर रहे थे, खुद खा रहे थे, खुद पी रहे थे. क्यों? क्योंकि ट्रिकी का बीमार होने का वजह ही यही था कि वो ऐसे रिच फूड खा खा के, ऐसे फैटी फूड खा खा के वो बीमार हो गया था. और ट्रिकी को इन सारी चीजों से दूर रखना था. तो ये सारी चीजें क्या होती? अब ये सारी चीजें डॉक्टर्स और उनके पार्टनर्स एंजॉय कर रहे थे. उनको बहुत मजा आता था कि उनको लंच के समय उनको जो है 2-2 ग्लास वाइन मिल जाता था पीने के लिए, ब्रेकफास्ट में उनको एग्स मिल जाते थे और रात में उनको ब्रांडी मिल जाती थी पीने के लिए. तो एक बहुत अच्छा सा समय उनका बीत रहा था. They were days of deep content. Content means satisfaction. The doctor and his partners, they were very satisfied, starting well with the extra egg in the morning, improved and sustained by the midday wine, and finishing luxuriously round the fire with the brandy. शुरुआत दिन की उनकी होती थी egg से, then मिड डे वाइन एंड फाइनली रात में ब्रांडी से उनका दिन खत्म होता था. So literally it was a wonderful time, they were having. It was a temptation to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest. अब इनको बड़ा अच्छा लग रहा था कि ट्रिकी को इनके अपने पास रखने में, क्योंकि जितना दिन ट्रिकी इनके पास रहेगा उतने दिन ये सारी चीजें इनके पास आती रहेंगी. वाइन है, ब्रांडी है, एक्स है. सो दे वर लिटरली टेम्पटेड ना, उनके मन में आ रहा था कि और दिन रखो ट्रिकी को. बट there was another problem. What was that? But I knew Mrs. Pumphrey was suffering, and after a fortnight felt compelled to phone and tell her that the little dog had recovered and was awaiting collection. But somewhere, Mrs. Pumphrey, she was suffering a lot. She was not at all happy being departed from her dog. Mrs. Pumphrey was very sad. So after near about 2 weeks, after near about 15 days, the doctor, he rang up to Mrs. Pumphrey. He called Mrs. Pumphrey and told her that your dog is now fine. Now you can come and collect your dog. Within minutes after 30 feet of gleaming black metal drew up outside the surgery. And the moment the doctor called Mrs. Pumphrey, within 30 minutes, a black car here, black metal here means this black metal here, gleaming black metal means shining black car. It came and, it just, it came and, it stopped in front of the hospital. The chauffeur means the driver, he opened the door and I could just make out the figure of Mrs. Pumphrey almost lost in the interior. And Mrs. Pumphrey, she was sitting there in the car, and interior means it was a very, luxurious car, very costly car. So beautifully, it was well decorated. The car was well decorated from inside, and Mrs. Pumphrey, she was sitting inside. Her hands were tightly clasped. Clasped means joined. In front of her, her lips trembled. "Oh, Mr. Harriet, do tell me the truth. Is he really better?" Now, Mrs. Pumphrey, she is very eager to know about her dog. So she is asking Dr. Harriet, "Please tell me, Dr. Harriet, what is the condition of my dog? My dog, is he really better? Is he fine?" "Yes, he is fine. There is no need for you to get out of the car. I will go and fetch him." Doctor said, "Yes, your dog is absolutely fine. No need to come out of your car. Just be there. I'll go and bring your dog." I walked through the house in the garden. Now the doctor went to the garden to bring Tricky. A mass of dogs was hurtling round and round the lawn, and in their midst, ears flapping, tail waving, was the little golden figure of Tricky. So all other dogs, they were moving rapidly. Hurtling means moving rapidly, playing all around. And in between all these dogs, Tricky was also playing. See, in the beginning, we saw that Tricky was not at all playing with other dogs. He was very dull, very lazy. But now there is a tremendous improvement in his health. Now, what is happening? This dog is also playing with other dogs. In 2 weeks, he had been transformed into a lithe. Okay, lithe means what? Active and flexible, hard muscled animal. Now the dog was not at all hugely fat. Now it was not overweight. Now it was very active, very flexible, hard muscled animal. He was keeping up well with the pack. Pack means the other dogs. He was well going with other dogs, stretching out in great bounds, his chest almost brushing the ground. I carried him back along the passage to the front of the house. Now the doctor, he carried that dog and he brought it back, to Mrs. Pumphrey. The chauffeur was still holding the car door open, and when Tricky saw his mistress, he took off from my arms in a tremendous leap and sailed into Mrs. Pumphrey's lap. And the moment Tricky saw his mistress, when the moment he saw Mrs. Pumphrey, Tricky was so overwhelmed, he became so happy that immediately he jumped, into the Mrs. Pumphrey's lap. She gave a startled "oh" and then had to defend herself as he swarmed over her. And now what happened? This dog, literally after so many days, this dog was seeing his mistress. So he started climbing over her, licking her face and barking, and all these things were happening. During the excitement, I helped the chauffeur to bring out the beds, toys, cushions, coats, and bowls, none of which had been used. Now, what happened? All these things were sent with Tricky in the beginning, as we saw, but none of these things were used. So what happened? Now the doctor, he brought all these things back, As the car moved away, Mrs. Pumphrey leaned out of the window. Tears shone in her eyes. Her lips trembled. "Oh, Mr. Harriet," she cried, "how can I ever thank you? This is a triumph of surgery." Now, finally, Mrs. Pumphrey took that dog in her lap, and finally, the car is moving, and Mrs. Pumphrey is very happy. She's very emotional. She had tears in her eyes, and she is literally, you know, crying and saying that how can I ever thank you? This is a triumph of surgery. So, my dear children, what is happening here? Mrs. Pumphrey thought that doctor had done some sort of surgery. यहाँ पे हम क्या देखते हैं, मिसेस पंफरे ये सोच रही है कि डॉक्टर ने उनके डॉग ट्रिकी पर किसी प्रकार का कोई ऑपरेशन किया है, कोई सर्जरी की है, और उस सर्जरी की वजह से उनका डॉग ठीक हो गया. बट इज दिस द ट्रूथ? इज दिस द ट्रूथ? नो. क्या ये सच्चाई है? नहीं. डॉक्टर ने किसी भी प्रकार की कोई सर्जरी की नहीं. द ट्रूथ इज दैट by giving proper food, by putting that dog on proper exercise, what happened? The dog became well. उन्होंने किसी भी तरीके की कोई ऑपरेशन डॉग पर नहीं की, बल्कि he put that dog on strict diet, he put that dog on exercise. उन्होंने डॉग से एक्सरसाइज करवाया, डाइट पर रखा, and all of a sudden what happened? The dog started recovering, और finally what happened? The dog became well. But Mrs. Pumphrey, she thought that it is a victory of surgery. Triumph of surgery means victory of surgery, means एक operation की जीत हुई है. But the fact is, it is not at all a triumph of surgery, but it is all the result of strict diet and proper exercise. So I hope, my dear children, you have understood this uh, chapter very well. Now, if your questions are there, let's go through these questions. You can see it on your screens. What kind of a person do you think the narrator, a veterinary surgeon, is? Would you say he's tactful as well as full of common sense? This is the first question. Now we'll move on to the second question. Do you think Tricky was happy to go home? What do you think will happen now? This is the second question. Now we'll move on to the third question. Do you think this is a real life episode or mere fiction, or is it a mixture of both? Do you think it is a real life episode, or just a mere fiction, or it's a mixture of both? Now coming to the fourth question, why is he tempted to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest? And the fifth question is, how does he treat the dog? So, my dear children, these 5 questions will be homework to all of you. Once again, go through the chapter and try to underline the difficult words, find out the meanings, understand the meanings, note down the meanings, and do the homework. Write down the answers of these questions. And I hope everything is quite clear to you. So, that was all from this video, and in the next video I'll come up with a fresh new chapter. That was all from this video. Thank you.
Well, my dear children, that was chapter number 1 of your supplementary reader book, Footprints Without Feet. That is a triumph of surgery. I hope you all have understood this chapter very well. Once again, I would request all of you, read this chapter, go through the 3 parts of the explanation we had in 3 videos, underline the difficult words, learn the difficult words, and whatever homework has been given to you, do it. If you have any confusion, you can ask me. So that was all from this video. Take care and God bless you.